Well, this is starting another Facebook Live session. I just started a couple of minutes ago and we had a technical glitch. As I was saying before the glitch, this is my third Facebook Live session. And today I want to talk about Islam in light of what happened in the United Kingdom with the terrorist attack that took, last I saw, at least 22 lives and 59 injured. This is a very, very serious situation. It is a common situation, unfortunately, today. And it is really the reason that I wrote a book, Muslim, What You Need to Know About the World's Fastest Growing Religion. That book, by the way, is available. People can pre-order the book. And if you go to our Equip page, you'll find out that there are certain things that I'll do in terms of personalizing the book and so forth. The book is rolling out October 10th, but you can go to equip.org/Muslim to pre-order my book, Muslim, What You Need to Know About the World's Fastest Growing Religion. Now, why did I write this book? I felt very inclined to write this book because many people, particularly in the West, have a false narrative with respect to Islam. I can tell you from personal experience that there are millions of peace-loving Muslims. And I'll give you one example of that. It is an example that I use in the book. When I spoke at the University of Tehran in Iran a few years back, it was an experience that underscored the notion of many peace-loving Muslims. Before I got on the plane going from Dubai to Tehran, I was greeted by people in line that were Iranian. Persians are very hospitable people in general, known for being hospitable. On the plane, I was greeted by a woman sitting next to me, Moja, who said if I had any needs in Iran, she'd be happy to help me there. When I got to Tehran, I was kissed on either side of the cheek by two Iranian Muslim men, and I heard the word peace, salam, and so I felt very, very welcome. But having never been in a Muslim theocracy before, I remember going to my hotel that night and not daring to come out of my hotel and walk out on the streets of Tehran. And the next day, I was greeted by my translator, a woman named Fatima. And she asked me how my evening was. And I told her, well, I stayed in my room. She said, why? I said, well, I was a little intimidated. Never been in a Muslim theocracy, and it was a little daunting to me. And she smiled with a smile that could light up a room. And she said, Hank, you can walk the streets of Tehran in the middle of the night. No one will harm you. Well, the next 5 nights I did that. And I was greeted by nothing but acts of kindness, people wanting to take pictures with me. Obviously, I stuck out like a sore thumb on the streets of Tehran. So again, why this point? This point is simply to say that there are millions of peace-loving Muslims. Now, having said that, there's another point I want to make, and that is that Islam is not a religion of peace. The narrative is that it is a religion of peace, but the narrative is simply false. You have Theresa May, the Prime Minister in the UK, saying that the terrorist attack was a function of a twisted mind. Well, this is actually not the case at all. The terrorist attack is a function of a twisted religious concept. And even that needs to be qualified. Because Islam is not a religion in the Western sanitized sense of the word. It is a socio-economic political system that rides on the rails of Sharia. So I want to talk to you about that today, answer your questions on this Facebook Live session. We did this in a hurry. I decided to do it today in light of the terrorist attack yesterday. We were going to do this tomorrow, so not a lot of advance notice for many of you, but I'm grateful for all those that are tuning in, and do remember, if you can't watch this live, you can always watch this in an archived situation. So tell people, if you're listening right now, that they can listen to this in an archived context as well. Let me just say a couple of things about doing Facebook Live. The first thing is, it really helps when you like the Facebook Live, when you comment, when you share, and that'll all be a way in which you can stand shoulder to shoulder with us in the battle for life and truth. Again, you can go to equip.org/Muslim to pre-order my book, Muslim, What You Need to Know About the World's Fastest Growing Religion. The subtitle is telling. Christianity is no longer the fastest growing religion in the world. The fastest growing religion in the world now is Islam. Christianity is still the largest religion in the world, but the fastest growing religion in the world is Islam. What I would like to tell you before I take questions is what my book is about. One thing that I deal with in the book is migration without assimilation. Has been well said, that is the python swallowing its prey with a long and slow digestion. There are systemic problems in European countries today. You have aging, aborted, dying Europeans being replaced by polygamous Muslims. And when that happens, there's a consequence. I remember Gaddafi saying before he died, before he was deposed actually, saying, why fly airplanes into buildings when in a short period of time those buildings will be ours? Again, he was talking about what would happen when Islam achieved critical mass and they could take over just as a result of demographic issues or demographic principles. The demographics never lie. The demographics are what they are, and today you have self-loathing Western elites oftentimes promoting a system that is going to lead to the downfall of the EU nations. But the book in general is laid out around the acronym Muslim. The M in Muslim actually stands for Muhammad. I like to make everything memorable for people. And what I do in that part of the book is I talk about the life and legacy of Muhammad. The U stands for unreliable revelations. And that, of course, includes the Ahadith. But primarily I focus on the Quran, which is rife with faulty ethics, factual errors, and feigned eloquence. And what I mean by that is people say that this is a book of surpassing brilliance and beauty. But I challenge anyone to try to read through the Quran and come to that conclusion. The S stands for Sharia. And I think this is an important point that many people have missed, even in leadership positions in the U.S. Sharia is state and state is Sharia. Therefore, the very notion of developing some kind of a democracy in Iraq was ill-fated from the very beginning. Sharia is state, state is Sharia. And if you read classic manuals on Islamic jurisprudence, you'll see that they enshrine inequity for women as a core value. The L in Muslim stands for Levant. Levant, of course, is the geographic center of the Middle East. And what I do in that section is I talk about what the Levant means for Christians, what it means for Jewish people, and what it means for Muslims. The I deals with the Islamic State, but not just in terms of the terrorist group that claimed a responsibility for what happened in Manchester, England yesterday, but also an end-time caliphate that is prophesied to subdue all religions under its mantle. So many of you will recall June 28, 1924. This was an epic moment in human history when Mustafa Kemal Ataturk abolished the caliphate. So now you have a caliphate that no longer exists as a result of a leader that says that Islam is an outdated religion of a dead Arab. And he makes Turkey essentially a secular state. All of that is changing with vast rapidity today. But the Islamic State, therefore, is trying to do or reverse what Kemal, or Ataturk, which means Father Turk, tried to undo. And you're seeing now in Turkey that it is moving hardline to the right, to becoming an intolerant Islamic state again. The M, last M in the acronym Muslim, stands for Major Muslim Misapprehensions. And what I do there is, using the principle of contrast being the mother of clarity, I contrast Christianity, the essentials of the historic Christian faith, with Muslim misapprehensions. I'm not going to go into detail there, it'll be far too long. I want to answer your questions, but it all starts with a misapprehension of the deity of Jesus Christ. In Islam, the very notion that Jesus Christ is begotten of the Father is the unforgivable sin of shirk, S-H-I-R-K. In Christianity, it is the core value. So Muslims believe that Jesus Christ was not begotten of the Father. It's an abomination to say that he was. But it is because they have a misapprehension. They think that begotten has to do with sexual procreation as opposed to special relationship. So this is not a way to try to win an argument with a Muslim. It is far more a way of using your well-reasoned answer as a springboard or an opportunity to share the truth and love and grace that only Jesus Christ can bring to the human heart. Take a couple of questions. Michael, how do Muslims not recognize the value of a human being made by God? Well, I do think that Muslims recognize the value of a human being made by God, but they have a misconception of anthropology, but I think far more important, they have a misconception of who God is. Now, I've said this on the Bible Answer Man broadcast many, many times, but it bears repeating in this Facebook live session. A Unitarian God, independent of the universe, cannot manifest the attribute of love. And as a result of that, we can say with great clarity and certainty that the Unitarian God of Islam is a morally defective God. Contrarily, if you look at the God of Christianity, the God who spoke and the universe leapt into existence, the God who knit us together in our mother's womb, before the creation of the universe. Now, I always have to qualify that, because before means that there was time, and obviously there was not time before, because God created time. But I think you know what I'm saying. Independent of the universe, a Trinitarian God can manifest the attribute of love. There is a lover, there is one who is loved, and there's a witness to that love. So one God is morally defective, the other God is not, and that makes all the difference in the world. But even beyond that, there are so many errors or misapprehensions in Islam that have a huge impact on how they view the world, their worldview, as it were. For example, in Islam, there is no original sin. There is an original slip. In Islam, there's no way by which we can become a new creation in Christ, where the old is gone, the new has come, and we experience the engrafted life of Christ. I mean, obviously, no one in Islam believes that Muhammad is grafted into their lives. So Muhammad becomes a prototype. It becomes someone to emulate. Obviously, every single Muslim in the world commits themselves to Muhammad, because saying the Shahada, which means that you're converting from whatever you are to Islam. When you say the Shahada, you're essentially saying there's no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his apostle, and you're going to try to emulate the life of Muhammad. What does Islam do in that regard? They take the whole world and they divide it into two spheres: the house of Islam and the house of war. If you're not in the house of Islam, you're part of the house of war. If you relate that to the terrorist attack that happened yesterday, you now no longer think that this is some kind of a twisted mind, but this is a core value of Islam properly understood. And you think about the Saudi Arabians, they have spent over $100 billion. Now think about that for a moment. Communism in 70 years spent maybe 9 or 10 billion, I don't know the exact amount, but a fraction of this in 70 years. And yet in the last few years, oil-rich Saudis have spent $100 billion exporting Islam into the Western world and exploiting really a false narrative of Islam as a religion of peace. Next question comes from Hugo from Harlem, New York City. Love it. I've been there many times. Just in New York. I was in Manhattan a few days ago. But Hugo says, how do we properly contrast that with Paul telling us, followers of Christ, not to conform to this world? Also, I hear some people say that the violence, atrocities committed in the name of Allah is not congruent with the teachings of Islam, whereas others say it is a logical conclusion. How do you see it? Well, look, as followers of Christ, we are not to conform to this world. That's exactly right. We're called to order our lives around the divine. And, you know, Muslims are doing much the same thing, but they're doing for a lie what Christians are willing to do for a truth. And that makes all the difference in the world. We can demonstrate beyond the peradventure of a doubt that Christianity is true, that it is not a blind faith, but it's faith rooted in irrefutable fact. Precisely the opposite is true of Islam. So we must not conform to the pattern of this world. We must order our life around the divine, but we do so on the basis of principles that have their genesis in that which pleases God and which is helpful to other people. I mean, if you think about the first and great commandment, what is it? It is to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and then to love your neighbor as yourself. The second part of the question, Hugo, I think is very important, and I've already touched on that. How do I see Islam? Again, many, many Muslims who are peaceful, and yet Islam itself is not a religion of peace, nor is it a religion of tolerance. Now, I won't spend a whole lot more time on this particular question except to say that there is a lot of mythology that has been passed off in academic circles by what I would call co-belligerents to Islam. So there are people in academic circles that are saying, look, if you want to see how Islam works, when it is in charge of the world, so to speak, all you have to do is go to what is popularly called the Andalusian paradise. This has to do with a period of time in Spain, when Spain was far broader in terms of its geographical prowess. A time in Spain, you could say roughly from the 700s to the 1400s. And during that period, the idea was you go to that context and you find that when Muslims are in charge, the world is peaceful. You end up having all kinds of scientific and mathematical inventions, and so when Muslims are in control, far better than when Christians or Jews are in control. Again, this is something that has a narrative to it, but the narrative, once you start looking into it, and I write about this in my book, there's a great book that was written called The Myth of the Andalusian Paradise. Once you start looking into it, it's very much akin to finding people communicating narratives because they have stakeholder interest, because they're doing shoddy research, because of sophistry and sloppy journalism. So the importance is to go back and look, was this really true, or is this a narrative that's conveniently being communicated in the West? And when you look at the facts, it's simply not true. I mean, this is as clear to me, and I document this in the book, as when I wrote a book called The Millennium Bug Debunked. And I said that the Millennium Bug was a classic case of what has been described as mining the subjunctive, cultivating the seed of threat buried in each unrealized instance, meaning that the whole premise of the Millennium Bug was based on sloppy journalism, sensationalism, sophistry, throw in a little script torture to boot. I remember being on Hannity and Combs when it was Hannity and Combs. Both Hannity and Combs were both arguing with me about the veracity of this being a world-changing event. And I was arguing, no, it wouldn't even be a top 10 news story in the year 2000. Well, this is a black and white situation. We had a before and an after. And again, after all the sophistry, after all the sales of books and generators and freeze-dried food, you find out that this had a lot to do with stakeholder interest and shoddy research. So we have to get our facts right, and this is part of what I do in the book. Let me say one more time, you can pre-order my book, Muslim, What You Need to Know About the World's Fastest Growing Religion, and I'll personalize it to you, a family member or a friend. All you have to do is go to equip.org/Muslim and let me know who you want to have me personalize it to. Fernando is next. His question, would it be fair to say that the peaceful Muslims are not real believers and that the extremists are the real Muslim believers? Actually, that's not far from the truth. Those who are involved in Wahhabism, for example, in Saudi Arabia, are involved in a Sunni strain of Islam that is very, very detrimental to all Christian sensibilities. I remember being at Harvard a few years ago for, I forget exactly what it was called, an Arab conference at Harvard. And I was there with a friend from Saudi Arabia who's a doctor in one of the most prestigious university hospitals in Riyadh. We could walk Harvard Square together, but we could never walk Kaaba Square together. And though I admire this man and I have a relationship with this man, and by the way, his son as well, who was there, I don't have any sense whatsoever of admiring their religion. Because were I in Saudi Arabia to pull out a Bible and maybe turn the page in the Bible and start telling someone on the street, someone that's asking me a question, put my Bible in my briefcase, that could be a very, very serious offense. In fact, if you want to see how serious it is, you just look at the Sultan of Brunei, what he's instituted in, in his little monarchy over the last few years, and you see exactly what happens when you're trying to convert someone to the religion of Christianity. Now, obviously in America, a Muslim can pull out a Quran, and if you say there's something wrong with that, you're called Islamophobic. So I think there's a Christophobia that is going on with respect to Islam, which is very, very serious. It's squarely in the blind spot of the West. People are talking about what happened yesterday, and rightly so. And my heart does sincerely go out to the victims of that new massacre, and there'll be many more in the future. You don't have to be a prophet to say that. This is going to continue, and it's only going to get worse. We sowed the seed. We're going to reap the whirlwind. But what's going on right now in the Middle East seems like no one really cares about in the West. Even Christians don't talk a whole lot about the crucifixions of Christians in the Middle East, in the Levant. The eradication of Christians, the fathers who are having their fingertips cut off, who are seeing their children killed before their very eyes. So the exiles and the executions and the crucifixions, all of that happening on a regular basis, and Christianity almost being eradicated from the Middle East. That is a function of following the way of Muhammad. And again, I document this in the book. I've written somewhere in the vicinity of 24 books. My book is going to be published by HarperCollins. It was thoroughly vetted because obviously this is a very controversial topic, to make sure that it's bulletproof in terms of what I'm communicating. But yeah, you'll see that this is not radical Islam. This is run-of-the-mill Islam. Next up is Chad. His question is what Jesus says about an eye for an eye, especially apt for Christians now. I mean, do we as citizens who are not law enforcement and military still do our best to love our enemy? Yes, the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. I mean, remember what Jesus said about that in the Sermon on the Mount. But I tell you, right? So what Jesus is saying in the Sermon on the Mount is very, very different from eye for eye. He's saying, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. So what we need to do ultimately is demonstrate the love of Jesus Christ to a lost and searching world. And that means when you encounter Muslims, and I've had many Muslim friends over the years, that you engage them not with hostility, but with love, because they are not the enemy. It is a religion, and I qualified that earlier by saying really not a religion in the Western sanitized sense of the word, but a socioeconomic political matrix that runs on the rails of Sharia, that binds their minds and thoughts to a false worldview, very detrimental to the world. So yes, we are to love and not to hate. We are to pursue tolerance and peace, but we are also called to speak truth in a post-truth culture. Sometimes that's difficult to do, but it's very, very necessary. Mark next, why do Muslims say that Jesus did not die on the cross, but that it was someone else who looked like Jesus? Well, again, this is a a canard. This is one of the faults of Islam. This is not just Muslims speaking something extemporaneously. This is what you find in the Quran itself, that Jesus did not die on the cross, when in fact we know that Jesus did die on the cross. So Muslims say God made someone look like Jesus, and the look-alike was crucified in place of Jesus. This is patently false. In an age of enlightenment, we can know beyond the peradventure of a doubt. And this is pretty much conceded by most credible secular scholars, just as it is by Christian scholars, that Jesus suffered fatal torment under Pontius Pilate, that he suffered 6 trials, 3 religious and 3 spiritual, and that he was crucified. And every single alibi for the story, whether Muslim or whether you find it in literature where people try to deny the historicity of Jesus Christ, every one of them fails when you look at the facts. I wrote about that in a book called Resurrection. I've written about that in several books. But the evidence for Jesus suffering fatal torment is overwhelmingly so. And it's one of the reasons that we can say, beyond the peradventure of a doubt, that the Quran is not a reliable resource. It is an unreliable revelation as opposed to the Bible, which is reliable. I don't want to get too far into the weeds on this, but you can demonstrate in many different ways, including archaeological revelations, that the Bible corresponds to history and evidence. With virtually every turn of the archaeologist's spade, we have more and more evidence for the crucifixion of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. So Muslims are dead wrong on that. The Quran is dead wrong on that. One of the points made in my book, and again, you can go to equip.org/Muslim to pre-order my book, Muslim, What You Need to Know About the World's Fastest Growing Religion. Shane next. What do you say to people advocating that the God we all worship is the same God? Well, first of all, I think it's very unfair to Muslims to say that. Muslims very clearly do not worship the same God that we worship. In fact, they think that the God that we worship as Trinitarian believers is an absurdity, is an outrage, and ultimately is a blasphemous notion of God. So the notion that Muslims and Christians worship the same God is simply false, and again, as I would put it, unfair to the Muslim worldview. And we should also say something in this regard with respect to words. If you've heard me on the Bible Answer Man broadcast, this is a mantra that I communicate quite frequently because I think it's important. And that is that words and phrases are not univocal, they are equivocal. They take on the meaning that the context allows them to have. So if I'm a Coptic Christian and I use the word Allah, I'm not talking about the Allah of Islam. I'm talking about a Trinitarian God. Conversely, if I'm a Muslim in the Middle East, a Sunni or a Shia, and I use the word Allah, I'm talking about a Unitarian God. So the issue is not the word that is used, it is the meaning that is poured into the word. And the meaning poured into the word in Islam is decidedly different than that in Christianity, and virtually every single theological error begins with a misconception of the nature of God. So, no, do we worship the same God? Absolutely, we do not. Let me see if I can read some straight off the screen here. The book goes in depth in many layers of the Sermon on the Mount. If not, should we seriously, prayerfully consider it? Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what this question is getting at, but I suppose if you look at the Sermon on the Mount, what is important to recognize is that what Jesus is doing is he's taking the Old Testament law and drawing the Old Testament law out to its logical conclusion, which is to say, if you want to be perfect on your own, here's what you would need to do. Essentially be perfect, even as your Heavenly Father is perfect. And Jesus is demonstrating the utter absurdity of thinking that we could be perfect on our own. So the Sermon on the Mount underscores just how significant it is to put your trust in the one who did what we could not do. Jesus lived the perfect life that we could never live, and he offers us his perfection as an absolutely free gift, which means, as Ephesians 2:8-9 puts it, we're saved by God's grace through faith on account of Christ. Now, the kind of faith that we manifest as Christians is the kind of faith that is ultimately rooted in works. Because, as James says, you show me your faith, and I'll show you my faith by what I do. So saving faith is never alone. Saving faith is always accompanied by works, by doing the works of God, by giving the cup of cold water, by giving the bread of life. And many Muslims, particularly during this particular stage in human history, that are dispossessed, are being reached by Christians who are giving that very thing to them. They've been exiled themselves. They're a whole lot safer than Christians are in that region of the world when you're exiled. But nonetheless, they are facing incredible hardships. Many of them, as they move to European countries, are going through difficulties. And there are Christians who have taken it upon themselves to leave family and home and goods to go minister to these Muslims. And all I can say to those Christians is, great is your reward in heaven. This is precisely what Christ would have us do. And one day, you and I are going to stand before the Lord. I'm in touch with my own mortality in this regard. Tomorrow I'm going to have ports put in my chest so that I can receive chemo and so that blood can be extracted and so forth. And I have a good chance of recovering from mantle cell lymphoma, but I'm going through a very difficult process physically. And going through that process puts you in touch with your own mortality and makes you ever more attuned to the fact that in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, we'll stand before God and give an account for what we did while we were in the flesh. So, well, we're saved by Jesus Christ alone. I mean, you think about what Paul says, there's no other foundation that we can build other than Jesus Christ, but on that foundation, we can build using gold, silver, and costly stones, or wood, hay, and stubble, and the day of the Lord will reveal what kind of materials we use. So labor not for that which perishes, labor for that which is eternal. By the way, I want to mention that before we go to our next question, I'm going to be doing the Bible Answer Man broadcast in just, I guess, about an hour and 20 minutes. So if you've never tuned into the Bible Answer Man broadcast before, you can get on Sirius XM 131. You can find it on the web at equip.org. We even have an Equip app that you can download at our website, equip.org. So a lot of ways in which you can listen to the Bible Answer Man broadcast, which is live every night, Monday through Friday, from 6 to 7 Eastern Standard Time. Okay. Here's another Fernando who's saying, do you ever get invited to speak on the subject by CNN or other networks? Well, at present, I'm not available to do that, but I will be doing that when my book comes out. We'll be talking about this in many public forums, likely a lot of interviews coming up. It's sort of providential. I was thinking about how long it took for my book to roll out. I mean, it's fully finished. It's into the publisher. But it's not rolling out to October 10th. That is true because HarperCollins goes through a very fantastic process of making sure that the book gets a lot of attention. And I'm thinking in the Lord's providence, I should be pretty close to through with my chemotherapy and my bone marrow transplant and the things that I have to go through. So I should be in good shape. Of course, my hair, I still have a little bit of hair. I cut it really short because with the chemo, it's probably all going to be gone pretty soon. But my hair will probably be growing back on, and I'm looking forward to that time of my life, having gone up the mountain and back down the other side. Of course, there are no guarantees in life. So either way, if I'm healthy and alive at the time that my book rolls out, I'll be doing a lot of interviews, a lot of media, and I'm looking forward to that with great anticipation. Alan is asking a question. Is this the end of times? Well, let me answer that by simply saying I'm not a prophet I'm not the son of a prophet, and so I cannot tell you whether this is the end times. What I can tell you is everyone who's tried to predict the end of the age has been wrong 100% of the time. And there have been so many, even in the Christian world. You think of men like Tim LaHaye, or a man like Harold Camping, and there are many others that I could name. I don't want to go through the whole litany of people that have professed to know when the end of time would come. The same kind of thing that we can say about Islam with respect to end time madness oftentimes happens within our own circles. So we have people, Jack Van Impe, most recent, I remember writing my book, Has God Spoken? Writing about his prediction that the end would come absolutely. I forget what month it was, but it was 2012 was the year. Well, 2012, I wrote my book back then. 2012 will come and go, and this will be another false prophecy, and so it has been. So I don't think it's our prerogative to try to say when the end of the world is going to take place. What we need to do instead is to be faithful and fruitful. I oftentimes thinking, Lord, please don't come back yet. Even though in a selfish way I would love Christ to come back and resurrect our bodies and have the experience of the eternal state, but then I think of all the millions and millions of people that have not been reached, and how important it is for us not only to be involved in fulfilling the cultural mandate, but the Great Commission as well. So, is this the end of times? I have no idea. During the Black Death in Europe, I'm sure they thought it was the end of the world. During World War II, I'm sure they thought it was the end of the world. There are many times in human history that we thought it was the end of the world, and we were wrong. So we simply do not know when Jesus will appear a second time and put all things to right. What we do know is that he most certainly will do that. And so we look forward to Jesus Christ returning and the eternal state being ushered in. I want to show you, by the way, what my book, this is a binder. It's not a book, but it's the only thing I have. That's what my book will look like, Muslim. It's kind of cool the way it's laid out. HarperCollins is an incredible publisher. It's the largest in the world, as far as I know, and the graphic design people and the people that are involved in the promotion of the book, and the people that were involved in editing the book, and you go through the list, some of the finest people in the world, and great people at their craft. And so I'm in good hands, and that book will be out again in the near future, October 10. And you can pre-order. You can get ahead of the curve, all autograph or personalized copy when you go to equip.org/Muslim to pre-order. Again, the book Muslim, What You Need to Know About the World's Fastest Growing Religion. The link is provided in the comments, and it will be posted in the description to this Facebook Live session. So you can share this video with your friends, and you can find the link. And again, getting a little more used to saying this, you got to like the Facebook Live. It's important. It's a way of you standing shoulder to shoulder with me in the battle for life and truth. Comment and share. I'm doing this particular session, Facebook Live, impromptu. Very little warning to people that I'd be doing it, but I felt led to do it in wake of the terrorist attack that has taken the lives of so many people, and a common occurrence. But this is one of those flashpoints that we oftentimes point to, oftentimes aware of, but the systemic problem we're not aware of. And I've written about that in my book, so that you understand what the python swallowing its prey with a long and slow digestion really means. Okay, another question. Do you know if contemporary Muslim lawyers working under Sharia, including those appointed as public defenders, are influenced by the idea of law trumping evidence? So if there is a change of blasphemy, do the lawyers tend to go straight to the guilty instead of starting at innocence until proven guilty? Well, I'm not an expert on Islamic jurisprudence. I've spent a lot of time with Reliance of the Travelers, which is a classic Islamic text, and reading through that and recognizing that there are four, actually five, schools of Islamic jurisprudence. I do not know the intricacies of Islamic jurisprudence, even though I spent a lot of time reading the Islamic manuals on law. I do know, however, how it affects women. As I mentioned earlier on in this Facebook Live broadcast, inequality for women is enshrined in Islamic law. I do know what it means in terms of enshrining the principle of war, so that all of the world will be brought under the domination of Islam. And I also know what it means in terms of enshrining an ethic which is antithetical to a biblical worldview that is ultimately part and parcel of Western civilization. Western civilization is built on a biblical sense of jurisprudence. Now, we're living in not the pages of the Bible anymore, we're living in the shadow of the Bible. So we still reap many of the benefits of Western civilization, but what's happening now within Western civilization is very, very detrimental to Christianity and a biblical worldview. And ultimately, we're not only fighting a war against Islam, as it were, but we're also in war, as it were, against liberalism. A phrase I think is very meaningful at some point, might be worthwhile to unpack. Michael next, should terrorism news even be televised? It may inspire more terrorism. Well, yeah, I don't know about that. I think that that is important to share the news of what is going on with respect to terrorism. We should never hype it, sensationalize it, but I think it is important to know what is going on around the world. When I say that the mass genocide of Christians is squarely in the blind spot of the West, I'm saying that because I think that it should not be in the blind spot of the West, that we should be familiar with what is going on vis-a-vis terrorism and mass genocide around the world. So I don't think that there's a sense in which we need to veil the news. But I do think that there's a sense in which we need to be diligent and have a sense of responsibility in how we communicate the truth. And oftentimes the news media does not do that. Sometimes they do that accurately. I'm thankful for the news media when it does accurately communicate what's happening. But I think it is a shameful reality in the West that we are blindly communicating a narrative that ultimately leads to the undoing of Western civilization. Now, sometimes when I look at all of that in a global sense, I can think of the fact that all of civilization is essentially fragile. Civilizations come and go. You don't think that when you go to Washington, D.C. or you go to New York today. I was just in New York a few weeks ago at Ground Zero. And you think when you look at the pomp and circumstance of Western civilization that it can never collapse. But it can. Civilizations come and go. So we can look at, again from a global perspective, what's happening in Asia. Tremendous growth of Christianity in places like China. in the Philippines, in South Korea, Myanmar, even formerly Burma. I was there recently and amazed at the inroads that Christians have made there. Vietnam. So Christianity is growing rapidly in some parts of the world, but we need Western civilization. We have 2,000 years of Western civilization, and we cannot easily dispense with that. So we can be very glad for what is happening in the eastern part of the world, so to speak. The Asian part of the world, I could speak of it in a more global sense as the global South, as it's sometimes called. What's happening in Latin America included in that. So we can be very grateful for that on the one hand, but on the other hand, you oftentimes have tumbleweed Christians. So they have little root, and oftentimes the first unanswered prayer means a reversion back to ancestor worship or whatever they came out of. So the real need, pressing need in the East is for discipleship, and in the West, the real pressing need is for us to recover our roots. And sometimes we think that it's impossible. And yet if we look at the principle of the power of one, we know that this is very, very doable. Think about what happened when one man nailed 95 theses to the castle door in Wittenberg. It started a revolution. It started a reformation. It started a protesting movement that culminates in Protestantism. So one man made a very, very significant difference. You think about Alexander Solzhenitsyn and the Velvet Revolution. Again, the power of truth, one word of truth, he said, outweighs the entire world. And so he created an incredible revolution, and we can do the same thing. But what it really takes is for Christians to be committed to doing for the truth what Muslim terrorists today are doing for a lie. They're emulating Muhammad. Yeah, there's a lot I could say about Muhammad. There are two Muhammads. There's a Meccan Muhammad. There's a Medinan Muhammad, just as there are, in essence, two Qurans. There's a Meccan Quran and a Medinan Quran. But people who follow the way and the pattern of Muhammad are following a pattern that has brought 1,400 years of death by the sword. Those who follow the crystal Christ, the paragon of virtue, are following not the way of the sword, but the way of the word. Let me just see if I can just slide in a couple more questions. Dan, is Islam the fastest growing religion in the world because of their population growth or because of their evangelism or their military conquering campaigns? Well, you know, it's a little bit of both. Many people in Muslim territories, they either are going to face the Shahada, which means they convert, or subjugation, which means that they're under a protection racket. Essentially what it is. They're paying the poll tax, the jizya, and as a result of that, they're left alone. Well, many just convert to Islam because they're nominal Christians or whatever other faith they might be. They just convert to Islam because they want to pay the gangster protection racket fees, if you will. That's a harsh way of putting it, but I think that's precisely what it is. And sometimes it is their evangelism, but I would say a great catalyst for growth in Islam is simply the fact that Muslim men can have up to 4 wives. And by the way, many more if they want, because to divorce a Muslim woman is very easy. You have to say, I divorce you 3 times. You can text it if you want. So, yeah, from a demographic standpoint, I think this is one of the ways in which Islam is growing with vast rapidity. On the other hand, in the West, the birth rate is not keeping up with the death rate. Carrie or Craig, have you ever been threatened for speaking out against Islam? By God's grace, I have never been threatened for speaking out against Islam. Even when I was at the University of Tehran, I was greeted by both the professors and the students with a great deal of interest. Of course, I was speaking on subjects that were not directly tied to communicating the Christian worldview, but all the while I was communicating on these subjects, like spontaneous activism fueled by social media, subjects like that. I was always communicating what I was communicating in the context of a biblical, a Christian worldview. Daniel, how should we respond and deal with ISIS? Well, it is a problem that is completely out of control today. And there are a couple of things that we can say about this. The first thing we can say is that it's important that we look at this critically in terms of how we vote. The ballot box is not sufficient, but the ballot box is necessary. Military strength is necessary, but it is not sufficient. I think one of the major things that we have to get right in the West, and it's one of the reasons I wrote my book, is we have to get the narrative correct. And today we are communicating in the West a false narrative. Theresa May was a quintessential example of that, but she's not the only. That false narrative has been communicated by George Bush the Younger, by Obama, Condoleezza Rice. I mean, I can go through Tony Blair. I can go through luminaries on both sides of the pond, people that I respect, but who are quite certainly communicating a false narrative. Again, that's why I wrote the book available. You go to equip.org/Muslim, and you can pre-order Muslim, what you need to know about the world's fastest growing religion. At this time, when you order it, I will. There are some things you'll find out on the web that make it appealing for you to pre-order the book, but I will also personalize it or autograph it to you, a family member or a friend. Remember, when I do these Facebook live sessions, like, comment, share. That's the way that you can make a difference. And many people support the ministry that I'm president of, Christian Research Institute, and we do need many people to support this ministry, prayerfully and financially. But you can also support us by like, comment, and share. I'm going to probably have to regroup before I do the Vital Last Man broadcast. My voice only lasts a certain amount of time. As I'm closing out the broadcast, first of all, remember to pray for those who have lost loved ones, those who are in distress. Pray for the balm of Gilead to envelop them. And I'm starting my chemo next week. I'm so thankful for all the people listening to me right now. I know there are many of you that are praying for me. I'm deeply grateful for that. And I'm more grateful than anything else that God has enveloped me in a blanket of peace. It is a wonderful thing to experience the reality of the Christian faith. We know that death is a certainty, but we also know that resurrection is a certainty. So I'm hoping to be around for many, many more years. I want to see my kids as they have their kids, and many of them that are not married yet get married, and I feel like God has many, many more years of fruitful service for me. I'm looking forward to that, if the Lord should will. I oftentimes pray the Lord will heal me. On the other hand, I want to take you through whatever I go through as a means of not exalting me in any way whatsoever, but in exalting Christ, that I might diminish and that Christ might be exalted. I hope all of you will order your life around the divine and stand shoulder to shoulder with me in the battle for life and truth. In just an hour or so, I'll be doing the Bible Answer Man broadcast live in studio, and we're going to do many more Facebook sessions. And I love this Facebook live format very, very much. I feel like I'm kind of leaned back and less didactic, so it's kind of fun to do this. I felt miserable before I pushed the button, and then we had a technical glitch, but God's providence, it all worked out well. And I kind of like all of that as well. I like the rugged nature of Facebook Live. It not always as predictable as what we have with the traditional media in studio. So I'm grateful to be able to do this today. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you tell your friends that might not have gotten to see this impromptu Facebook Live session, that it's archived. You can find it on the web at equip.org, and you can find it on the Bible Answer Man Facebook page. So thank you so much for tuning in to this Facebook Live. We'll do many, many more sessions on Islam. We'll probably break it out in a way that is maybe more digestible in the future, but I'll pray for you, you pray for me, and let's make a difference. While there's yet time, I close, but once again saying like, comment, and share. Those are the quintessential words of importance, and thanks again for tuning in. So long for now.